Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the MJ SportsCast. This is Mike Tang. I am joined by my host, Jerry Yang. Jerry, how are you doing today?
Pretty excited that the Warriors won. Last time we weren't able to chat about it until now, but pretty exciting. I went to the parade. That was pretty cool. There was a lot of people there. A lot of got to see Draymond, got to see Curry. I'm really happy that they won. I don't know what I couldn't ask for a better result for the Warriors season. So, how about yourself? How you doing?
Well, I wanted to ask you about the parade because the last time I went to a parade was when the Giants won the World Series back in 2010 here. And for me, it was pretty hectic in terms of all the crowd and all the commotion and everything like that. And it was kind of a gloomy day, too. So I kind of had like a poor experience, I would say,
Mm.
going to the parade here. But what was your perspective, on it?
Yeah, I think for me, so I did go to the Warriors' first parade in Oakland, when they won their first championship back in was it 2014 now. So it's been a while. What was interesting about the Warriors' first one in Oakland is I think it was like a 2 or 3 mile stretch of the parade. So it was pretty spread out. I was able to get up to the fence and see all the players, and it wasn't like super hectic. But this one was 1.5 mile long parade just down Market Street. And yeah, I agree with you. It is pretty hectic. So um, getting there logistically actually was pretty good with BART. There was a BART that went every 4 minutes going, every 4 minutes coming back. But once you're there, you're probably 7 or 8 people deep from the fence. And I came kind of late, right? If I think if you went early, you probably got to go up close. But yeah, I couldn't see the players if they weren't under double deckers, if they're just like walking around, which a lot of the players were towards the end, especially. So I ended up leaving right after I saw Curry, right? And he was up in the upper decker with same with Steve Kerr and Draymond and all those guys. But overall, I think it's a fun experience. I know you had a pretty miserable one. If you don't like crowds, that's probably the case, right? You wouldn't enjoy this as much. But for me, I didn't mind it at all. And I kind of had a day off because of Juneteenth. And so I thought it was like, something I wanted to do, right? And I just kind of went by myself, didn't really have anyone else to go with, which is fine. Enjoy the festivities and then just came home and had lunch, so.
So you're able to come back home for lunch. That's what you're saying?
Well, I mean, it was like 2 o'clock, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So it started what at 7 a.m. or so or
No, no, no. It
8 a.m.?
started at 11 a.m. So 11:20 a.m. is when it started. I didn't get there till 11:45, and the parade didn't really start until then, actually.
Yeah.
And then it ended around 2, but I left around 1 ish, and then was able to get home, by 2. So
Awesome.
pretty chill overall.
All right, let's kind of talk about what happened in the NBA Finals and what led the Warriors to their championship recently here. Let's kind of talk about Game 6 here, where Steph Curry, he wins Finals MVP finally here. A lot of players on the team, they really talk about the media critics, post game and how they hear all the talk and how they're kind of proving to everyone how they could still win, especially at their age right now
Uh-huh.
here. What is your take on, some of that commotion and some of that banter that happened post game?
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I think it's a lot of talk, but I am pretty proud that Curry did get the MVP and get
Hmm.
4 championships. I think kind of solidifies his legacy as not always depending on others and being a bust during the playoffs. That I think all goes out the window, right? I'm also pretty impressed with Steve Kerr having 9 championships. I think he's like 4 or 3 or 4 short of Phil Jackson having 12 or 13. So hopefully he'll stay in a little bit longer with us and win more championships to get that record, right? But Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how the Warriors do next season. I think they probably would be better actually, right? I think Kuminga and Moses Moody will probably, they have a year in. Then we're going to be in their second year. Hopefully, we get James Wiseman back. But I think the Warriors are set up pretty well. I think two guys I saw that were due for contracts are Looney and GP2. Hope we can keep both of them, but who knows, right? And I think one good thing about the Warriors ownership is they're not afraid to dip into that luxury tax. The one of the few ownerships where they don't care too much about those costs, right? They're actually committed to winning a championships, and the results really show, right? So, it does feel like forever since the Warriors won the championship, but if you think about it, Toronto, when we lost to Toronto, that was 2 years ago. So this team is, kept together for a really long time, and it was only a matter of time before they won this. So, what?
Yeah, I think the pandemic filled season felt like what two seasons worth of
Yeah,
basketball there, or lost basketball, and then we had another season where we we only won like 15 games, right, and we're the worst team in the league here. So it wasn't really that long, to be honest with you. How many championship appearances has that been now? That's been what, like five or six
yeah,
championship appearances, and we won like around four of them
yeah.
here. So we win two without Durant and two with Durant here. Do you think that really impacts Kevin Durant's legacy in terms of solidifying himself as one of the greatest players of all time here? Because that's been much of a big debate, especially in the national media broadcast here, and it really makes Kevin Durant kind of look, I would say, really bad in a sense, because he joins his super team supposedly there. He wins two in a row, then he leaves. The Warriors win without him here. But do you think Kevin Durant has anything to say about what the Warriors just did with their championship run?
Well, I'm sure he does have a lot to say. He's a guy who, even though he won it with the Warriors, he did get two Finals MVP with us, right? So I think his legacy in terms of being one of the best player in the game, like easily solidified, right? I think he's gonna be a future Hall of Famer and all that stuff. But in order to really prove himself, I think he does have to win one without the Warriors, right? And I don't think that's ever going to happen unless he gets into a really good situation again. He tried to build a team, couldn't get along with Kyrie. Looks like Kyrie's on the way out as well. Um, but yeah, he's always gonna not be able to solidify his legacy, I guess, as one of the best top five or top six player unless he does win one, right? And I think that's part of the reason why he left the Warriors. I think he always had this hang over his shoulder, right? That the Warriors are who actually made him. And it is kind of a weird circumstance if you think about it, right? Like he couldn't beat the Warriors with OKC. He's lost like I think two playoff series with them, and then he ends up joining them and then winning it all. And then now that he left, he ends up losing again in the first round. So it's not
Mhm.
like, yeah, I think he's always going to have that stink over him. So
You talk about the Warriors and some of their young talent coming up here. But Steve Kerr mentioned in Tim Kawakami's podcast fairly recently that the Warriors are championship teams. They tend to get better the following season here. And, we're looking at the NBA draft. That's coming up on Thursday. The Warriors have three picks, not very high picks per se, but they have picks number 28, number 51, and 55 in the second round here. I haven't done really much research, on the draft prospects there. And, usually when you draft that low around the 50-ish range, you're pretty much kind of, flipping a coin in terms of, what you're getting. But do you think the Warriors have a chance to really make some noise in this NBA draft in terms of acquiring some big time talent or combining those picks to move up in the first round?
I don't think they're going to move up. I don't think NBA teams really trade to move up, but I think the 28th pick is pretty interesting. mainly because remember we got Draymond with the 35th pick, right? So in the second round, so I think there's gonna be gems out there, and if anyone who can really evaluate talent in terms of late rounders and finding out, I believe in this group. I kind of believe in Bob Myers, and hopefully we can get just more depth pieces, especially with the 28th round, right? To get like a solid guy off the bench, hoping it's probably gonna be a center of some sort or a real six man maybe. But who knows, right? I think the Warriors will do what they need to do there. I don't suspect they're going to trade him. They would have, I think, traded those picks already if that's what they were going to do. But Bob Myers, I think, on multiple occasions mentioned that they do want to stick with the picks and try to get younger with the team overall. So I don't know what they're gonna do. Like you said, I didn't really research too much. I think I was just too excited about this championship win that I didn't really look forward too much. But yeah, this I think one thing about this championship, I feel like it means a lot more than the other ones, mainly because of a lot of the storylines going into this playoffs, even right. Think about like Clay Thompson, 2 years off, coming back and now winning a championship, right? Like the 2 years of rehab must have been really mentally tough and draining for him. And then if you think about the injury to Curry right before the season started, we weren't even sure he's going to play most of the games in the first series, and then also some of the injuries with Draymond. So in terms of teams getting better the season after, this team might get better, but there is definitely a lot of risk, right? Because the core three are getting older,
Mhm.
So I'm hoping what we can do is get a lot of the younger guys to kind of solidify their positions, and becoming more reliable pieces that will be the new core three in the long run. So I'm looking at guys like Jordan Poole, who I hope will re-sign, right? And a guy like like I mentioned, Kaminga and Moody, right? Those guys have to be our foundational pieces going forward. So
Kenny Atkinson accepted the Hornets job during the NBA Finals. And then after winning the NBA Finals, he rescinded the offer that the Hornets gave to him here. It was rumored that he was offered 4 years, $20 million there to stay with the Golden State Warriors to hopefully go for another finals run here. But, my take on this is that he kind of had cold feet. He wasn't able to maybe evaluate the whole situation while being in the finals and preparing for those teams there. But do you think Kenny Atkinson should have taken the Hornets job? From a career standpoint, because those jobs are just really tough to come by here. We just never know, when a candidate will be able to, obtain an NBA head coaching position. Look at Mike Brown. It took him many years sitting on the Warriors bench as an assistant to get a Sacramento Kings job. But what do you think about Kenny Atkinson's decision to stay with the Warriors?
I mean, can you imagine turning down 20 million? Like on the surface there, it's like pretty rough to turn down, right? But I think for Kenny Atkins, he was a head coach, I think, of the Nets about 2 years ago or something. So I think he knows what it's like already to be a head coach, and maybe he would just wasn't ready to jump back into it, right? He wanted to maybe learn a little bit more from Steve Kerr, learn a little bit more from how to become a winning team, right? I think he's only been with the Warriors for a year, and then he was with the Clippers before that. So I think in his eyes, I think he'll eventually try to get another head coaching gig, though not guaranteed. But probably in his mind, this is too premature for him to jump ship. So I personally am glad he's staying. I think a lot of these coaches are better off as assistants. I mean, if you look at Luke Walton, right, being part of the Kings job, not great. I think even Mike Brown will probably end up regretting becoming the head coach of the Kings. All these teams who have head coaching positions open aren't going to be the best teams. They're going to have a vacancy because they're one of the worst teams in the league, and they had to fire their ex head coach. I think if there is going to be a good position, it's going to be a head coach that's retiring, right? Like if it's someone like I don't know, Greg Popovich eventually, or like yeah, like even Steve Kerr eventually, right? That those are the type of gigs that I think a assistant want to get into, where you have a team that's a couple pieces away from winning, versus I think the Hornets and the Kings even have just too many pieces to be able to be competitive. In my mind, I think he made the right choice, especially if he felt like it's not a good fit for him or gonna hurt his career, and if the Warriors keep winning, I think his stock just keeps going up. So in every single league, whenever you do win, your assistants get offered no matter what. Like
Right.
look at the Rams, like look at the Niners, even making it into the Super Bowl. We lost all our assistants from that Super Bowl team, right? So yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think it's a bad decision. So
And I think it's pretty ridiculous how some fans think that Steve Kerr will be retiring like soon. And that's why Kenny Atkinson is staying with the Warriors here. And that's pretty, I mean, like, I can see the reasoning behind it if they haven't been following this team, too much. But I feel like Steve Kerr has, felt rejuvenized, throughout the last year or two, to be honest with you, here. And I could picture him, coaching for at least 7 to 10 more seasons. And I also don't think he'll be coaching the Olympic team there in a couple years if he doesn't envision himself being a head coach in the very near and long term future. So maybe Atkinson does have some intel internally in terms of when Kerr will retire. Maybe he is going after this job specifically here, but I just don't think it's the very like deciding factor on why Atkinson stayed in the Bay Area. I think because mainly he doesn't want to uproot his family all the way across the country, and that he's really comfortable here. He loves the culture here, and he just wants to continue winning.
yeah, and I think it's going to be a big drop off for the Warriors if he does take over. To be honest with you, right? Like you can't replicate what Steve Kerr has done, right, and continues to do. So it's gonna be interesting to see what his legacy will be. So
All right, real quick, let's briefly talk about some NFL news here in terms of the Niners side. Um, Jaquiski Tart, signs with the Eagles finally. He leaves the 49ers there. He was a pretty, solid, I would say, average, safety, for the 49ers. Wasn't really spectacular, didn't make a lot of huge plays at all, but, he was just kind of solid, right? But we're always going to remember that drop, against the Rams there in that fourth quarter. What would have happened if Tart caught that interception? I
mhm.
think a lot of 49ers fans really think about that. But do you think that's going to really impact the way the 49ers will, do things defensively there? Do you think Tart is pretty replaceable?
I think overall he's a pretty solid player, right? Like I know we focus a lot on the drops, but he did make a lot of big plays leading up to that game as well. And he's kind of a veteran presence. But I think the only part that really hinders him is his injury history, right? Like he goes pretty hard, gets injured pretty often. And now that we've signed Travarius Ward, Lenore's stepping up, and drafted Sam Womack and all these guys that are in the linebacker or the cornerback position, I feel like he became more and more expendable because of that. So personally, I think I wish him luck, but in terms of a drop off, I don't think it's going to be a huge deal in my opinion. I think we'll be just fine.
I agree. I completely agree on that here. And then Jimmy Garoppolo is back on the news finally, right? Um, some ESPN analysts think that Baker Mayfield for Jimmy G is still on the table here. Are there any legs under this, or is this just one of those like slow off seasons and we just need to kind of stir up something in the media?
Look, if there was any legs to it, the reason why the Niners would want to move away from Jimmy G, in my opinion, is to free up $25 million, right? Baker Mayfield's owed $18 million. So I mean, a $7 million savings, not a huge thing. I don't think Baker wants to come here. I think Baker envisions himself as a starter, so he wouldn't want to come. Jimmy G, I think, would be okay with going to the Browns in some ways, but then I don't know if he wants to be a long term backup, right? He'll probably start for a few games when Watson is suspended. But then what's after that? I think both guys want to be starters. And I don't think there's going to be any movement on Jimmy G until you see in the news that he starts throwing, right? The moment that video release of him throwing and him looking good while he's throwing, and he's done with all his rehab and surgery or whatever it is, right? Then I think we'll see some movement with Jimmy G, and that could be either cutting him because the Niners can cut him once he's done with injury, right? Because they don't want to get an injury hit or a injury fine hit, dollar hit if they drop him now, or they would trade him. I think ideally they do want to get a piece for him, and July 23rd, I think, is when training camp starts for veterans, and that is when they have to pay that 25 mil. So I'm thinking by then we'll hear something, and that's still a month away.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see still. But I think the moment he starts throwing, which a lot of people are speculating it's going to be right after July 4th, right? So that's coming up in a couple weeks. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this whole situation, and football in general is just one of those sports where you come into a league, the first 2 or 3 seasons, you're basically who you are, right? When you come out, you're not really going to get any better for the most part, right? And that also applies to quarterbacks too. And I'm trying to compare quarterbacks to, like, pitchers in baseball, right? Where pitchers, I feel like they can gain velocity. They could, like, add some off-speed stuff in the off season. They may even get a surgery in terms of Tommy John and throw even faster, after that surgery. But, when you're looking at the quarterback position and you get some sort of surgery that Jimmy Garoppolo got here, it's fair to say that he's not going to be a better quarterback because of it, right? And he's not going to throw harder because of it here. And it's just unfortunate because, football is just one of those sports you just kind of stay the same in terms of the level of play that you put out there on the field.
Right. No, I agree. Right. And especially at the quarterback position, like it's so important that you don't really want to gamble your whole team's future on a guy that's coming off injury. I think that's why we haven't been able to move Jimmy G this whole time. And, that's unfortunate, but it's the reality of the situation. So,
All right, let's move on to Major League Baseball here. The Giants, they've been really streaky this season. They've lost 3 out of 4 against Atlanta, at Atlanta here. And really recently, they've been losing a lot of walk-offs on the road. And there's been some criticism in terms of what Gabe Kapler has done with his bullpen here. And I'm looking at 2 guys, right, on the bullpen, and that's Jake McGee and also Tyler Rogers. And both of those guys are sporting ERAs, over 4.5, 5.0. McGee ERA has gotten even worse, this season. And you kind of look at what happened with Duvall a couple days ago. I think he pitched on Monday in a tied game. He ended up losing that game to a bunch of singles, and that was a walk-off. The following game here, he came in with a 4-run lead in the 9th, and he gives up a 2-run homer to Matt Olson. And then he kind of throws the ball in frustration, thinking it was third out in that inning here. He ends up closing the game, right?
yeah.
But then the game afterwards, the Giants are in a close one. They have a 3-1 lead, and they can't put Duvall in just because they didn't want to tire him out. He can't pitch more than 2 games in a row here. So you're kind of left with McGee and Rogers, and they both blow it. And they kind of blow the whole series, to be honest with you, here. You win that game, you gain some momentum. for the following game there, and then Alex Wood basically gives up 5 or 7 runs, and you can't really recover from that, and you lose 3 out of 4 to Atlanta here. Do you think the Giants are just misdealing, or not misdealing, but I would say mishandling, some of their pitchers this year as opposed to last year?
I mean, specifically the bullpen, we knew it was going to be kind of shaky. I think it's been shaky since the last few years, right? We haven't had a real closer, and a lot of guys are blowing games for us, especially. I mean, it was on display last year during the playoffs, that we obviously had a weaker bullpen than the Dodgers, and that's what cost us that series. So this isn't the lights out bullpen we had with the Bochy years. I think people just need to realize that. And yeah, it's definitely going to hinder, I think, the Giants going forward as well. I don't know if we're mismanaging it. I understand the criticism about Duvall, but I think Kapler is just kind of playing what he knows. And McGee was a guy that's reliable in the past, right? And he's trying to give him some confidence maybe in this game, and that was kind of his only option. And I think he was trying to win out with Duvall, like, because Duvall did also give up a game on Tuesday, right? So I think he was trying to boost his confidence too. And I mean, the season's still really early, so you can kind of play with the bullpen a little bit and kind of mess around. I think a lot more with lineups and trying to boost your guys' confidence and things like that. But overall, it is concerning, though. We don't have a pretty solid bullpen. And you're not going to be winning championships by not having one. So I don't know. I think overall, though, at least the starters are starting to look a little bit better outside of Woods. And yeah, I don't know, man. Like, what do you think? You think there's any solutions we can have with this bullpen? It seems like the same old story every week.
Yeah, I mean, you're either going to DFA McGee or sit Rogers out a little bit more and maybe play Leon out there.
hmm
Um, I agree with just kind of throwing Duvall in safe situations and not pitching him 3 days in a row here. So you kind of have that option of McGee in that ninth inning. But I think fans are just really, really tired of, seeing McGee give up runs after runs. And he only basically has one pitch, and all the hitters are sitting on one pitch. And then you have another pitcher in Tyler Rogers. Yeah, he's a submarine pitcher. Yeah, his release point is pretty tough to find from a hitter's perspective. But let's face it, the guy could barely hit 85 miles per hour on the radar gun, you know, and
Yeah.
he gives up hits and he gives up contact. He's not a strikeout pitcher,
hmm
and when he puts runners on base, or you put him in there with a runner on first and second, you can guarantee that he's going to give up some sort of contact, right? And that's why his ERA has been pretty high this year. So
Yeah.
it's a tough situation, and I just think the Giants will do something. I think in the trade market, in terms of acquiring a reliever before the July 31st deadline here, but they definitely need some help in that area for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely the weakest part of the team now, right? Because before it was kind of like the catching position, but Austin Wins is starting to look really good. I think even before Luis Gonzalez got hurt, he was actually looking really good as well. We got Lamont Wade Jr. coming back. Belt came back. Yastrzemski has been solid. So I think on the offensive side, we've been actually looking pretty good,
Yeah.
overall, I think. And then starting pitching, like I mentioned, we got Discafani back on Tuesday. Rodon's been lights out. Junis got hurt, unfortunate, but he was looking pretty good before he got hurt. So, I mean, Alex Wood not looking great. I think he's going to be the weakest of the starters. But once Junis comes back, I can imagine maybe Wood moving to the bullpen or just, being that depth piece, I guess, right? But like, yeah, they do have to address it somehow, and maybe the free agency is what you're referring to. Might be the way, if they're actually serious and committing to winning this season, right?
So in terms of, I guess, roster moves here, the Giants a few weeks back, they traded Dubon there to the Astros. And then now another young player that the Giants actually drafted is Steven Duggar here. And, we've seen him make, some noise in the big league level, but he's never been able to stay healthy. And, we sent him over to the Texas Rangers for a player named Willie Calhoun, who's not actually lighting things up and in that Ranger farm system here. Do you think the Giants are just kind of giving up on some of these young players, or do you think it's just a matter of too many outfielders, in one position group, and they really need to just kind of make these moves?
Yeah, maybe it's the latter, right? But then, I mean, this guy is also a left fielder, so I think it is a positive overall because I think they were probably going to cut Duggar regardless, right? So the way I'm going to look at it half full, where they got something in return, a little bit of a gamble piece, right? Really, Willie Calhoun isn't exactly been hitting lights out. He was with the Dodgers, and then with the Rangers, and now he's with us. But at least we got something for Duggar, who I think overall has been a little shaky, right? I think from his injury history, his ERA or his average hasn't been great. So yeah, I'm gonna look at it half full that maybe they got a guy who would be a good piece for us, and he's not really expected to be a awesome player, I think about what we gave up for what we got. I think it was worth the chance and worth the gamble, so we'll see. And this front office staff really knows how to evaluate players, in my opinion, especially on the offensive side. So I'll hold judgment until I see a few games of this guy. Not saying he's gonna be a superstar or anything like that, but they made some great moves. Like Jock Peterson was a guy that I think no one really saw coming, and he's becoming like a foundation piece for the Giants this season. So we'll see how it pans out with him, but maybe a change of scenery is good for Willie.
I think they just don't have much room, to be honest, in that outfield depth chart, right? You have Lamont Wade Jr., who's in the minor leagues, and he's probably ready to come back in a week or two here. But you also have Luis Gonzalez, who just hit the 10-day injured list. So I just think they have a surplus of outfielders, and it looks like Duggar just kind of ran out of options, right, in terms of minor league options. So
Yeah.
it's unfortunate just because you can see the potential in the guy, but then the guy just was never able to stay healthy. He was just never able to stay on the field. And if you're not able to stay on the field, you're basically pretty useless within a major league organization. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So very unfortunate, right? And then I think with Gonzalez out, Slater actually came in the last game, and then he looked pretty good. So yeah, I think you're right about that depth piece. So we'll see. Like you can never have enough outfielders, I think, but we'll. But yeah, I do agree with the Duggar injury stuff. So I think that was probably the driving force and probably why they probably would have cut him anyways.
yeah, well, at least the starting pitching looks pretty solid, right? In terms of Rodon and Alex Cobb coming back from the injured list. Here, Dave Sclafani came back, but it looks like he gave up a bunch of runs upon his return as well. And then we always have Logan Webb as the number one starter for this rotation. So as long as that rotation stays intact and can keep us in games here, I think we're going to be okay. And I think we're also 6 or 7 games over 500 and atop of the wild card race too. So I don't think it's really time to panic per se. It's just really frustrating to watch games, especially against Atlanta this week.
Yeah, I think we're also kind of spoiled by last season and how many wins we got, and now we're getting hit with like a real season. This season's kind of more of the norm, whereas last season was more of an outlier, I think.
Yeah.
And a lot of fans are kind of overreacting because of that, I think. So,
All right, let's move on to our picks of the week.
all right, and we do have an intro, so let's hit it.
Picks of the week. Mike and Jerry give their Bay Area picks of the week, entertainment purposes only. Picks of the week.
All right, so picks of the week this week um we do have Giants baseball still. And I do have one futures pick for the Niners. So let's first start off with the Giants, right? So we did conclude the series with the Braves. We're about to start a new series with the Reds at home, right? The Reds are 23 and 45 there. So not great overall. But we have, let's see, game one with Alex Wood versus Kyle Wright. Kyle Wright is 7.4, 3.18 ERA. Alex Wood is 5 for 5, 5.05. And then next day we have Alex Cobb going against Graham Ashcraft. Mike Miner going up against Webb. That's going to be a good matchup. I think Webb is looking pretty solid there. Mike Miner always kind of underrated in some ways. And then finish off the series, a 4-game series, is Tyler Mahey with Discafani. So, what do you think? Just pick wins and losses. What do you think on there?
Well, I think I learned my lesson from a few weeks back in terms of predicting a sweep, and that didn't really happen during the Rocky series, but it did happen against the Dodgers, right? So I think
Right.
my sweep analysis, it kind of worked, right? But just worked against the wrong team. So I'm going to learn my lesson and not predict a sweep this time here, just because, like, if you lose that first game, you have just no margin for error on your pick anymore, you know?
True.
So, I think the Reds, they're not as bad as we think they are, to be honest with you. Here, they do have some pretty decent talent there, but I do think their pitching staff is pretty vulnerable. And I think that our offense is heating up. And sometimes, going to Atlanta and playing there and playing in hot weather can really help out the hitters, right? So I think they're going to pick that momentum up and start picking up some runs at home. They have Logan Webb going that first game. It's actually the second game. And then they have Cobb going that first game here. So I'm going to pick them to win the first two games here. So going 2 out of 3, picking the Giants. What about you?
2 out of 4, right?
Was it 2 out of 4? I saw that it's a 3-game series.
3-game series. Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got it. Oh, okay, yeah. Because I mixed up the Braves game this week or today. So you're right. It's a 3-game series. So 2 out of 3, huh? Okay. So yeah, I think to me, I think the web game is going to be pretty good. I think we got that one locked. But Scafani coming back, not looking great. Maybe it's just a first game, maybe not. Alex
Mhm.
Wood's been kind of shaky, right? And Graham Ashcroft is looking pretty good. I mean, that guy is, I think, one of their best starters there. So, to me, unfortunately, I'm going to take 1 out of 3 here. I think we'll
Wow.
win the Logan Webb game. I think maybe it's just shook my confidence after that Brave series that I just don't believe yet. I think we still have too many question marks in the bullpen. We are at home though. I think maybe that's going to be my downfall. That at home they play a lot better. But I'm just going to be semi-conservative and just say 1 out of 3. Just winning that Alex Webb game. So or Logan Webb game. I mean.
Okay.
All right, so Niners regular season wins. So as you know, this season it's an extra game. I think we have 17 games now overall. So over under based on Vegas regular season odds are 10 games. So what do you think? Over
You
under
know,
10 wins.
that 10-game benchmark is pretty darn spot on in my opinion. Can I just pick 10? Can I just go like right on the dot at 10 here?
Can actually, right? I mean, that's kind of what it is. Over unders is either you tie with 10, right? If it hits 10, you don't win anything, you don't lose anything.
Yeah, my gut really tells me it's going to be 10. It's going to be what, 17 games, right? So they'll go 10-7 here. And I just think like it's going to be way too optimistic for the 49ers to win 11 to 12 games, especially with Trey Lance under center here, just because I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains
Mhm.
coming along for him. So I'm really like that 10 games, winning 10 games, lose 7 games here. So I think they're going to lose maybe 4 games within the division, I would say, and 3 games out of the division. So I'm picking 10 games. What about you, Jerry?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the over because I think overall, our schedule isn't too tough actually, right? There's gonna be a few games that are gonna be tougher, but Seattle is looking a lot worse.
Yep.
We'll get some wins there. We still has a Rams number. I think everyone underestimates that. The defense is really what beats the Rams. So Trey Lance handing off the ball a few times, we can still win that game. The Cardinals is gonna be the wild card. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals actually sweep us or we split with them. So yeah, I
Hmm.
think I'm gonna go with the over. I mean, we look at game to game basis, right? Niners with the Bears. Justin Fields super shaky, but you're on the road. That could go either way. So let's just put that one as a loss. So that's one loss there. Seattle Seahawks, like we mentioned, we're gonna win the two, so that's gonna probably be 2 wins there. Broncos on the road, tough. Russell Wilson always has our number. Lost there,
Yep.
so 2 for 2. The two Rams game, I'm gonna say that we're gonna sweep them, right? I'm being optimistic there, so I'll say we're 4-2 now. Panthers, we're probably gonna win. We're a better team than Panthers, so 5 wins. Falcons, we're gonna win, so that's 6. The Chiefs, let's just say that's a loss, right? So I won't count that. And then the Chargers, probably a loss. Herbert's looking pretty good. The Saints, probably a win, right? Very shaky at quarterback with Winston there, so that's 8. Uh,
Mm.
Dolphins up in the air too. So maybe a win there, maybe a loss, but it's Mike McCarthy's first year, so I'm going to say that's a win. So you're at 9. Buccaneers, we'll say it's a loss. Tom Brady's pretty good. Commanders, I think that's a win. We're going to probably beat the Commanders, so 10. And then it comes down to the Raiders game, the Raiders and the Niners, and probably a loss there, maybe not, but let's just say it's a loss. So I mean, that's probably where Vegas gets their 10 wins, you know, right there, So the reason why I'm going with the over is I'm thinking we can maybe best the Cardinals, maybe upset one of those good teams that I mentioned, specifically looking at the Chargers. I think maybe we can win there. Maybe we can win the Bears game to start the season, so yeah, so I'm gonna go with the over because I think even though these good teams on paper look really good, we're gonna upset somebody, right? So I think that's where I'm gonna pick there. So
Cool. You're going the optimistic route, and I'm going with the conservative route on this pick.
you're going with the Vegas route,
I
So
am. I am.
I mean, there's some odd lines that make it 10.5, and then in that case, you're on the underside, right? Or if it's a 9.5, I mean, it'll be over. I mean, what do you think about that? If it's like 9.5, would you be confident to take the over there, or how confident are you that it's gonna be 10?
I like that 10. I like it just because, like what I mentioned, I think the Niners will lose over 6 games this
Mm,
season here. And I just think there's gonna be growing pains, with Trey Lance. And,
mm,
they may be at 500 at some point early in the season there and be treading water and
yeah.
then finally hit their stride, in the later 2/3 of the season. So
Let's see.
I think it's going to be 10. I think they're going to sneak into the playoffs there with 10 wins here, and kind of excited to kind of see where that goes.
Yeah, same here, same here. So I mean, overall, that's the biggest question mark, right? I think is Trey Lance. How is he gonna play? How is he gonna do? I don't know. He looked great. I think for the couple games that he started, but then he got injured after all of them.
Yep.
So it's like I think the Niners are really taking a big gamble on him, so he better pan out. What's interesting though is like the NFC West odds came out as well.
Mhm.
The Rams are favored by plus 140, but right behind them are the Niners at plus 180, so that's pretty neck and neck considering, Cardinals are plus 300 and the Seahawks are at plus 1200, as a long
Right.
shot. So it's like, if you look at plus 140, the Rams really have probability of 41% of winning the division, which isn't a lock, that's like
Yeah.
less than 50%. So to
Yep.
me, it's like a coin toss between the Rams and the Niners to win our division there. So
All right. Well, that concludes this week's episode here. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for tuning in. We're happy that the Warriors won the championship once again here. And let's just hope that the Giants can kind of pull their weight in terms of this weekend. And we'll see you guys next week. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the MJ SportsCast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at the MJ SportsCast, at Mike408, at MindofJerry11. Tune in next week for another exciting episode.